Hello, welcome to Living Faith by the Letter. I'm Rob Lester, your host in this weekly video series that's designed to encourage and challenge people to study the Bible more and to practice their faith in real, tangible ways. The letter we're going to be considering today is the letter F, and that stands for fasting. What is fasting? Well, fasting is when you abstain from eating and drinking, or maybe just eating, different variations of it for a period of time. Fasting. In preparation for this video, I decided if I was going to talk about it, that I needed to put my money where my mouth is. So I just last night ended a 3-day fast. We had a church fellowship dinner, and I thought that would be a good way to break the fast. So that's what I did, and I've done this a few times. The longest I went was a week, and it's very enlightening. But what about fasting? Well, we read about fasting in the Bible. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, as he's instructing his disciples in what we know is the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 16, Jesus says, "Whenever you fast, do not put on a gloomy face as the hypocrites do, for they neglect their appearance so that they will be noticed by men when they are fasting. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that your fasting will not be noticed by men, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Now, the important word in that statement there is the word when. Jesus didn't say if you fast, he said when you fast. So there is an assumption on the part of Jesus that we will be fasting. Yes, they're under the Old Testament at this time, but in the context of what Jesus is talking about there in the Sermon on the Mount, he's giving instruction on giving. He says, when you give to the poor, do this and don't do this. And he also gives instruction on praying. When you pray, do this and don't do this. So if we are to be continuing to give to the poor, certainly we are. Are we not to be continuing to pray? Of course we are. So it would be irresponsible to pull fasting out of that context as well. So we should say that this is something that Christians ought to be doing. How often and to what degree? It's not stated. But the fact that we should be fasting is something that appears to be clear from the teaching of Jesus. Now, fasting even to the Jews was only commanded on one day of the year, on the Day of Atonement. And there were many other fasts that were added later by tradition. Uh, this is what we see in Luke chapter 18, where you have the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, and the man says, "I fast twice a week," and that was a tradition brought on by the Pharisees. I believe it was Wednesdays and Fridays, but they were added for different reasons. But what is the purpose of fasting? What's the benefit of it? Why is it initiated? Well, generally, the idea of fasting is that you're replacing food with feeding on God in prayer, in contemplation, in a time of despair or feelings of grief. Many people would fast then. But fasting today can be a very beneficial tool, and it's an exercise that we can engage in. And the point of it is to sort of prove that we are able to resist feelings of hunger that are physical urges. And it's enlightening to see that when you go through this process, this exercise, that you may be stronger than you think, and that can be very encouraging. But also, in contrast to that, and in addition to that, it teaches us ultimately that we can't go forever without food. It teaches us ultimately about our weakness. We can see that we can understand some of our strengths and be encouraged by that, but it also really drives home our weakness and how much we rely on God. That we can make improvement, we can grow, we can get stronger, but ultimately we need God to perfectly and completely purge us of those bad habits. But just the act of fasting for a period of time, even a very short period of time, shows us that we can make the right choice, even when it's really hard. And those times when the hunger pangs come up and you're tempted to go grab a snack, and you can say, "No, I've committed to this, I'm going to do this." And then you can engage in prayer. You can read your Bible to gain some strength from that. The idea, at least the way I apply it, is dedicate that time that you would normally spend eating meals or even preparing the food, and dedicate that time to prayer or to meditation or to reading your Bible. Instead of eating breakfast, that 30 minutes or whatever it would be, just sit down and read your Bible instead as a spiritual meal. Um, It can also be helpful to see fasting as an offering or a sacrifice to God. It's something that you are doing, that you are laying before Him. You're saying, you are more important to me than my own physical needs, and I'm giving this to you. I'm giving you this time that I normally would be spending on myself and taking care of my physical needs, and I'm going to dedicate that to you. We always have to remember that we cannot save ourselves by our willpower, but we can exercise it like a muscle, and you can get stronger and better from having gone through that. Now, we need to be careful. We have a tendency to swing the pendulum to over here just fulfilling all of our desires, meeting all of our needs, and satisfying every hunger and craving and desire that we have. And we can swing the pendulum over to what's known as asceticism, something that came along a lot of times in the Middle Ages among the monks, who would live in a cave and live on bread and water or whatever, and never wash themselves, and the idea that we can't do anything for the body, that we make no accommodation for the flesh. We need to be careful about going too far from that, because that in itself can become a religion. Even the idea of mortification of the flesh, where people would whip themselves with branches and whips and things to punish the body because it was so wicked and evil, the flesh, that we need to beat it down so it doesn't control us. We can't go too far in the other direction. The Bible talks about this as well in Colossians. Paul writes in Colossians chapter 2 and verse 20, "Therefore, if you died with Christ from the basic principles of the world, why, as though living in the world, do you subject yourselves to regulations? Do not touch, do not taste, do not handle, which all concern things which perish with the using, according to the commandments and doctrines of men. These things indeed have the appearance of wisdom in self-imposed religion, false humility, and neglect of the body, but are of no value against the indulgence of the flesh." So he says ultimately it's not going to do anything no matter how hard you punish yourself. The old King James Version calls this will worship, that we're worshiping our will, our own strength, our own ability to tamp down these desires. And that, in essence, is what we are seeking. We're not seeking to please God or to gain a better relationship with Him. We're seeking to master our own body, become our own gods. This is just another flavor of idolatry. That's the idolatry of self, and it's exactly what Jesus was preaching against in Matthew chapter 6 as we begin. So fasting, how can you do this? You can do it lots of different ways. There's lots of resources available on this. Richard Foster's book, Celebration of Discipline, has a really great chapter. The chapters leading up to that are also very good, uh, about this mindset and what the purpose of it should be. Very practical, very good stuff. It doesn't have to be for a week or 40 days like you see in the Bible. You can fast just one meal. You can just say, I'm going to skip lunch today, and I'm going to spend that time reading my Bible or in deep prayer, going through my prayer list. It can be just maybe 1 hour of the day that you might dedicate. It could be you could fast for just one day, and break the fast in the morning, or a few days or a week, whatever you want to do. But take that time to use that to help you draw closer to God and reconnect more with Him. And it doesn't have to be just food. You can also take the principle of Lent, the idea that we're giving up something. And you can say, for the next week, I'm not going to drink any soda, or I'm going to take a social media fast. I'm going to stay off Facebook for 30 days, or I'm not going to watch YouTube if you do that, or I'm not going to use my phone all day today. I'm going to set it down. I'm going to leave it at home, not take my phone with me even. Maybe maybe going, and when the warmer weather gets here, maybe going a week without air conditioning or something. That'll readjust your priorities sometimes and make you very grateful for things that you have. But the purpose of this, the lesson is that we need to control our appetites, not let our appetites control us. So look into fasting. Maybe give it a try. I think it'll benefit you. It's always a worthwhile exercise, as long as you're careful on how you do it and make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. If you're watching this on YouTube, I want to encourage you to please click the like button and subscribe so that the channel can become more visible. It'll come up more in searches and suggestions. And thank you for spending this time with me. I hope it's been a blessing to you. Have a great day.